Welcome to the MILO Show.
Thank you for joining us. We're occasionally gifted with the presence of a special in-person guest, somebody with extraordinary domain expertise, somebody who has invested time and money in an interesting current affairs related production, somebody who is impressive and substantial. But today is not one of those days, and instead we have Gabe Hoffman. How are you?
How you doing?
I'm fine. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. I'm teasing.
Hard to live up
That was
to.
a long setup for the oldest joke in the world. Actually, you are quite impressive. You were the youngest hedge fund manager on Wall Street at the age of 23. Still going strong, still managing your own fund. I didn't really understand anything about economics, so we're going to just skip past that. Finance is a mystery to me. What I am interested in, however, is the movie that you funded and produced, and some news that came out today. You are the entity responsible for An Open Secret, which is a movie that, how many people have seen it now? Probably millions.
We made it free in October, and it's 4 million already.
Mm-hmm. And this is a movie about things that happen to children in Hollywood. Now, before we get into some of the things that are in the movie and other things that you want to share with us today, news came out this week. If you're watching this show, the news will have come out a day or two ago about Dan Schneider, who is a producer at Nickelodeon, who was just let go. The over-generous industry parlance requires us to say. Tell us about Dan Schneider. What's going on there?
Well,
This mysterious layoff.
so Dan Schneider's the biggest fish in children's television, period.
Mm-hmm.
He's creator, producer of everything from All That, and Amanda Bynes, Jamie Lynn Spears. You're talking, early 2000s, all the way to the present. Okay, he's Nickelodeon's franchise, and basically, straight out, he was choice number 2 to base An Open Secret on, to draw a pedophile ring around.
Yep.
Instead, because of Digital Entertainment Network, then we did Bryan Singer, but Dan Schneider was a strong number 2.
Will be unsurprising to a lot of viewers of this show that it's possible to pick who you're going to draw your circles around in Hollywood. What can you tell us from your research, from your reporting, from what you have continued to look into since you released the movie, about what Dan Schneider may have been up to, and what do you think, as an expert in this subject, is likely to topple out over the next couple of years?
Well, let's start with the people who broke it, Deadline Hollywood, Dawn Chmielewski. Okay, she's the editor over there, and she's in our film as a reporter. She's been working the beat for, 20 years, exposing child sex abuse in Hollywood. She's one of the best there is. Okay, she's the Ronan Farrow of L.A. child sex abuse that nobody knows.
I don't think it's a compliment to call anyone the Ronan Farrow of anything, but I'll let it go. Go on.
So, they wrote about Schneider's being fired, and what they said is 2 things, and they took it very lightly. They said there's rumors of inappropriate behavior, and they said that there is inappropriate, tweets with kids' feet. Now, rumors of inappropriate behavior could be like you yelled at a kid.
Toes.
Yeah.
I almost don't want to ask, but I have to. What is up with Dan Schneider and toes?
There's a whole tweet thread on our thing, An Open Secret.
Yeah.
We got.
It's one of those things you kind of don't.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to look at it because you need to know, because it's important, because we have to do our jobs. But at the same time, people are grateful for guys like you who have these. I don't know. It's like when you work for the police. On the Vice Squad, you get cycled around different things. You have to be moved off child porn. You get put onto drugs. You get put onto whatever, because it's too psychologically taxing for detectives to stay on something like child porn for as long as you've been looking into and exposing and helping to do this. So you're a man of greater constitution and fortitude than me, is what I'm trying to say. Just for people who have not seen the tweets, tell us the toes.
I mean, you're talking, he's had years of tweets with like a picture of a star's, feet, look at her toes. He's had, actually asked fans for pictures of their feet. He's done, he did a whole show on a kid's feet. There's little video clips where, there's a star, and these are like extra things that weren't even in the show that show up they put on like YouTube, where like the girl's putting the foot in her mouth, the whole thing.
Let's back up a second. In the movie, let's back up even further. Everyone, I think, understands at this point that the sexual deviance in Hollywood goes way deeper than anything that's been reported in the course of the Me Too and Time's Up movements. Now, most people, I suppose, are expecting the next big wave to be homosexuals. For the Geffen boat, Sandy Gallin. I was on the Geffen boat a couple of occasions in 2007-8. I was thinner. And that's, I'm going to be putting some of that in my next book. A lot of that's very politicized and all the rest of it. But one thing that people are not politicized about is the abuse of children. And rumors have been swirling around Hollywood for decades, if not generations already, of the kinds of things that powerful people get up to in Hollywood with vulnerable children who are sort of thrust into stardom by their parents. This guy in particular is suggesting things are going to topple out about. Movie has some people things are going to topple out about. I happen to know, maybe we'll talk about it at dinner later, a former child star who told me, named some people for me. We've got Corey Feldman and the other Corey who killed himself. All of the signs have been there. Nobody's really wants to pay attention to them. When Corey Feldman, for instance, comes and tells his story, there's a sense that the mainstream media is attempting to discredit him. Now, we understand why Matt Lauer wanted to undermine victims. It became clear later why he wanted to pour cold water on accusers in general. But with all of this noise and all of these extraordinarily powerful people and the enormity, the horror of the things that we now believe that they have done, how is it that journalists at places like The Hollywood Reporter haven't found it within themselves, haven't found the bravery, haven't taken the risk to save these children from predators? Why is this stuff happening, it almost seems now, in open air, with people able to see it but looking the other way?
You must have seen the Twitter smackdown I gave to the editor-in-chief of The Hollywood Reporter, Kim Masters.
I am I enjoy your social media exploits. Tell us about that, because one of the things that you do on a regular basis is call out journalists for not covering this aggressively enough. I sort of don't care whether journalists have covered, vague allegations of improper behavior between women who are entering into a contract, into a deal. They know what they're going to get. They're willing participants in this sort of ugly, toxic dynamic of the Weinstein universe. But
the casting couch.
There adults. Is something completely different when children are involved. How is it no reporters have dared to drop a single bomb on this subject?
Yeah, I don't get it. For example,
people have no souls? They have no children? Do they have no consciences?
So the pictures, the tweets, and the little video clips, and we're talking video clips, let's be clear, of somebody like Ariana Grande. And I'm not saying that she's been abused or anything. But
she acts like she has.
But like Ariana Grande, okay, laying on a bed on her back with her head off of the bed. Mm-hmm. With a really skimpy tank top, about as skimpy as you can get. She's 14. She looks about 12. Mm-hmm. And she's pouring a bottle of water all over herself like it's an orgasm scene in a porn shoot, okay?
Yeah.
Now, I've been pitching that story for years to journalists to say, hey, look at this stuff and ask Nickelodeon, what's up with this? Why is this stuff on TV? Is this cool? When you have a scene of Ariana Grande, Milo, and she's holding a little spray bottle of tan stuff, again, wearing a little skimpy tank top, and she's holding it like this, and she's making orgasm noises and saying, oh, can the juice come out? Okay, you got a freaking problem, and you got something to ask people questions about.
Okay, but there's one thing over-sexualizing young stars and making them look as young as possible. You might say, for the sake of argument, maybe that's trying to make Ariana Grande appeal to 12, 13-year-old girls by making her look 12 or 13, and maybe to 12, 13-year-old boys, right? It's not immediately where my mind goes, frankly. Oh. When I see a 20-year-old star trying to look like a 14-year-old star, I'm like, well, they're just trying to pick up the 14-year-old fans. Sure, maybe I'm unduly innocent, although I don't think I am. But that's not really what I'm talking about. It's not. Hollywood has shown us who they are. We know who they are. We've seen American Beauty, right? now everybody, Hollywood is just brazenly advertising what it is and who these people are.
Call me by your name.
Right, but we're talking in some cases, not all cases. Some of it is more like diddling and perviness. But we're talking in some cases, and you've looked into cases like this, I know some cases like this, of child rape. And child rape by people who, if not run studios, help to run studios, or people who are, influential, whatever. Nobody's been able to give me the answer to this. Like, how is nobody doing this reporting? What is it these people can do to you if you expose them? Are they going to have you assassinated? Are they like an army of Clintons who can hire assassins to take out reporters? Because as bad as they got for Harvey Weinstein, he never tried to have anybody killed. And if there's anybody who could, presumably it'd be him. So I don't understand why, given the horror, I've been on the receiving end of false allegations of stuff like this. Because I spoke loosely about something that happened to me, but that was like 13, 14 years old. I'm talking about like children, How has not a single story about this appeared in any big Hollywood publication? Like, this guy did this. How is it possible?
Well, first of all, with the Me Too movement and everything, and look, anything that happens to women, if it's bad, if it's assault or rape or whatever, or they feel like they have to casting couch, and they're not a real woman like a Rosanna Arquette or a Mira Sorvino who just says, I'm not that kind of girl, and it's not worth selling their soul, which both of them did to Harvey Weinstein and got their career, sidetracked. If you're a kid, you're under the age of consent, okay? Legally, by definition, that's rape. They can't consent. So whether you're 14 or whether you're 10 or whether you're 16, look, the law in the state of California is 18, and that means somebody who's 30 or 40 shouldn't be perving on you, regardless, especially if they're in a position of power. And there's more on a kid because it's like you got to be the breadwinner, your family, the whole thing.
I'm gonna be difficult. I'm gonna push you.
Oh,
because you're right about all that, but it didn't really answer the question. There's a big ecosystem of journalism, of books, of movies about Hollywood, of books about Hollywood, of people obsessively covering the latest will they, won't they of relationship intrigue of young starlets. And there is serious reporting going on about Hollywood too. What I guess let me ask it a different way. Is there something structurally wrong with Hollywood journalism that has prevented people from telling the big stories, from writing the exposés necessary to protect children?
Sure. Two things. One is it's a big source. So if you're going to write about Nickelodeon and all the stuff in the stars, you're never getting sources on anything again. Number two, it's these things, these journalists are expecting, like Me Too, which is adults, to come to them on a silver platter and say, hey, I was an abuse victim, and just tell their story. And because nobody's given a shit about them for years, it doesn't work that way.
This sources thing, has that ever been true? I mean, has anybody in the history of journalism ever broken a massive exclusive and not got more sources as a result, not less? People keep saying this, and it sounds to me, like excuse making for cowardice. Because I have never seen in my reporting career an example of somebody break a massive international exclusive and for them not to become somebody bombarded with stories, sources, prestige, bylines, mastheads to write under. It simply isn't true, is it? That if you break a story of this magnitude, your access is going to be cut off in Hollywood. Actually, the reverse has happened every single time it's been tried.
Okay, I'll give you that. But here's my point.
Isn't it just an excuse for cowardice?
So here's my point. Nobody's given a shit about kids in Hollywood basically forever, since Charlie Chaplin was raping 14-year-olds, okay? So they're used to that, and they don't think anybody will believe them. None of these journalists are willing to do the digging to get on the field. These stories are a lot tougher to break, and they're just not willing to do the work. So they're not willing to do things that are a lot easier, like ask a bunch of questions about Dan Schneider and hope that, there's answers and nobody got abused.
In the process of digging around and not publishing a story, you could burn all of your bridges. I guess that's possible.
Or like the Elijah Dushku thing. I mean, that's crazy.
Tell us about that. So I know her as Faith from Buffy, and the lead character, whose name I don't remember because I only watched it once, of the ill-fated Whedon series Dollhouse. Whenever they put brains into bodies, they could swap consciousnesses into bodies, and you could hire the bodies. And if you were, icky, you could hire them as for the obvious, but also you could hire them as assassins. You could hire them as whatever. So Elijah Dushku, I love her. I think she's great. She was terrible in Dollhouse, but I like her. Tell us about what happened with her.
So she was 12 years old during the filming of True Lies. True Lies, big film, directed by James Cameron, who did Avatar and is probably the #1 grossing director in the history of Hollywood. She was the daughter. Jamie Lee Curtis was the mom. Arnold Schwarzenegger was the dad. The stunt coordinator was a guy by the name of Joel Kramer. Elijah Dushku is now in her late 30s, and she came out with a lengthy Facebook post in January and said she was sexually abused by this stunt coordinator, Joel Kramer, when she was 12. So the story is given to the journalists.
And she named him in the
Named
post.
him and had multiple corroborators, and it's all right there for them to start investigating, right?
And what happened?
Okay. It was incredibly pathetic excuse for journalism. So the first thing they did is asked the legal on-set guardian, and that's a lady by the name of Sue Booth Powers. So any film where a kid goes to filming underage for
you have a chaperone.
a month, well, it's that person's sole job, Milo, to make sure you're tucked in bed at night, you only work certain amounts of hours, have breaks, the whole thing. And one per kid, let's be clear, okay? So that's her only job, is to protect Elijah Dushku.
They're doing a good job in Hollywood, those people.
Yeah. So they ask her what happened, what was up. And she goes into this whole misogynistic rant where the Hollywood Reporter and others print all of it about power structure and men and just a bunch of bullshit. And she says, I told somebody on True Lies who was in a position of power, and they met me with a blank stare and did nothing. End of freaking story. Journalism 101, why don't you ask Sue Booth Powers, who did you tell? I mean, that seems pretty freaking obvious, right?
Yes, I suppose it does.
Well, somebody finally did ask. It wasn't the Hollywood Reporter. And thank God, by the way, Sue Booth Powers is not working in Hollywood, not responsible for kids anymore. So
who's been the worst out of the publications that you've surveyed?
the Hollywood Reporter.
Hollywood Reporter.
Other than TMZ, who's just in the tank for like any abuser unless it's egregious.
Right, but TMZ is basically this. I've been involved in that. I have been on it, and I know how the process works. Your PR guy phones them or whatever, says where are you going to be. They give you like 3 things. You're like, yeah, cool, I'll talk about that and that. You hop out. They do the quick camera thing. It appears on the site. Boom. It's just a simple way to keep your name like circulating. So I've been part of that process. It's really just an extension of the public relations process. It's not a journalism site. So the Hollywood Reporter has been particularly cowardly.
And Hollywood Reporter is the main publication in Hollywood. They're one of the few that still has a big print magazine as well as a huge online site. Like they're considered the industry rag.
Yeah, you get into your Suburban or your Escalade in Hollywood, and you've got this massive magazine in the back. It's everywhere. Okay, so
somebody finally asks this Sue Booth Powers who she told, and she says Ray Sancini. So Ray Sancini was a producer, R-A-E, another woman. She was a producer on True Lies, the film at the time. And they ask her, and she says, no, nobody told me anything. Now, Ray Sancini today happens to be the president of James Cameron's big production company, the biggest grossing director in the history of the film industry.
What else is she going to say?
So you've got 2 adults that are telling completely different stories. And none of these outlets are asking any questions like, hey, James Cameron, you big wealthy guy. People are saying that your now president got told about a 12-year-old getting abused and she did nothing. And your president saying otherwise. How about an independent investigation, hire a law firm, and find out what the truth is? This is important to find out how a 12-year-old girl got abused.
If the president of your production company looked the other way when a 12-year-old girl was molested
making that accusation
or raped. Yeah. Okay. So this you're saying is an example of what happens in Hollywood when things are brought to people's attention. They brush it under the carpet. They look the other way. They suffocate it. They pretend it didn't happen. It just sort of like, oh well, we'll look into it. It just disappears.
I do you one better and even quicker. The new Bryan Singer video. Okay, we have an interview with somebody who was with Bryan Singer, 2014-15. We're editing it now. It'll be out in a couple months. There's a 1-minute teaser we put out during the Oscars. It's the pinned tweet at an open secret. Okay, I gave that to a reporter at the Hollywood Reporter and said, this is your exclusive if you'd like to cover that we actually have this interview.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a couple tidbits on it.
Yeah.
You know, that'd be a plum thing to get, right?
You would imagine so.
Yeah, a couple weeks later, the guy comes back and says, no, the higher-ups won't even let him write about Bryan Singer anymore.
I see. And to what extent is that? I mean, is that because all the people who keep the magazine financially afloat?
David Geffen is connected with all that, and Bryan Singer's part of that network. During our film, Milo, there was a guy by the name of Jonathan Handel, okay? And this is a lawyer. He's not even a journalist working full-time for the Hollywood Reporter, okay? Just as a hobby, he would write about labor issues sometimes. So not even our sort of area, right?
Yeah.
Well, he was friends with Bryan Singer, the director of X-Men, the big subject of our film, personally in life, and friends with Gary Goddard, who was talked about in our film and has just been revealed in December. There were 8 kids accused him of having abused him, you know, including, I mean, just in the big LA Times expose, okay? So these are 2 people that turned out, well, they let this guy write hit piece after hit piece after hit piece about us, about our film, and we kept telling the Hollywood Reporter, this is not a journalist, this is somebody who covered a different sector as a hobby, as a contributor, and he's friends with these people and he's not disclosing it, this is not right. And they did nothing.
I see. This is the problem, I suppose, with trade magazines versus conventional journalism. So I experienced something of the same when I was coming up as a technology reporter. I even had a job for one of them, TechCrunch, which is the leading Silicon Valley startup blog, or at least it was at one time. I have no idea if it still is.
But the bottom line, Milo, is this. If anybody learns anything from our film, like how for parents to protect their kids, we talk about how behavior can be a signal that you have to investigate bad behavior. Like Evan talks about in An Open Secret, the inappropriate language that was used, that he's 11 years old, hanging around with his talent manager, and the guy's talking about blowjobs and shit like that. That's a warning sign that parents got to teach their kids, hey, if you got a coach or you got somebody like that who's using inappropriate language, you got to tell us about it so we can start asking some questions. So I bring you back to the Dan Schneider thing. We pointed out inappropriate behavior, not just to the Hollywood Reporter. I pitched that story 20 times to everybody. Like, start asking some questions, see where this goes. And worst thing is you get a story about a guy putting stuff on TV he shouldn't. You know, other scenario is it turns out there's more. And nobody would get started.
Yeah.
They all wanted instant gratification society handed on a silver platter. These cases are a lot tougher to crack. This is, you know, a very hard thing to bring out.
This is why independent filmmakers are so important and so valuable, because you're, you know, you're funding and producing yourself. You don't have to, I guess, follow the strictures of people in larger organizations, and you, of course, could probably weather the lawsuit if you had to. Now, let me ask you
the editor-in-chief, this Kim Masters, by the way, she, you know, sanctimoniously had gotten in and replied to one of our tweets and said, we looked into Dan Schneider and you know, nothing was wrong.
What was her explanation there? Because clearly the guys just, look, people don't get suspended for
fired. Your franchise.
People are these days getting suspended for no reason on the basis of mere allegations, but somebody like that, there's something up, right? What precisely was her explanation for having never published any reporting on that subject?
Well, she had jumped in on our tweet and said,
she injected herself
we
into
looked into this, spent all this time and couldn't find anything, but if anything changes, just, you know, call us and let us know. So I just gave her, you know, a bunch of the items that we discussed.
The toes. Okay. Let me ask you a more general picture. As somebody who's been immersed in these stories for a while now, there seems to be, since the end of the standards codes and all the rest of it, what was permissible to be seen on the silver screen many decades ago.
Separate beds.
Yeah. Sort of the
I Love Lucy.
Bollywood-esque era of Hollywood with sort of the curtain has to come down before they kiss, all the rest of it. They're not married. Blah blah blah. It was a more innocent time. It was a better time. It's funny that sort of social conservatism. When those rules went out the window. Hollywood quickly sped in the opposite direction. And now what we see is a sort of collapse into moral nihilism, where it's a sort of topsy-turvy world where it's almost, provided you have sufficient success, you're less at risk for fucking kids and raping women than you would be if you were a Republican voter or like a Trump fan. It's relative. I mean, it sounds stupid when you say it out loud, but it isn't. We both have friends who operate in this world who know this. How did Hollywood get itself into this position? Because it's not like there's a couple of bad eggs. This is like an
whole rotten basket. Yeah.
Right. This is an endemic, like systemic. This is part of the cultural fabric of Hollywood, is looking the other way at the most obscene horrors for an easy life because there's professional advantage in it. How did Hollywood go from this place where people had to sleep in separate beds if they weren't married in the movies to this like cesspool of moral turpitude? Like, what's your assessment of what happened? What's the background? What's the history of this? Like, where did the pedos come from? Why is there so much rape? Why do people not report it? Why is everybody looking the other way? This is sick. It is a sick, like, toxic atmosphere. Where did it come from?
So the stuff never changed. It's always been a cesspool from Charlie Chaplin's day. Going on. Okay, he had like a 14-year-old girl he knocked up. I mean, his 1927 divorce papers are outrageous if you ever read them.
Practically Islamic.
Yeah, so it's always been a cesspool. We're just starting to find out a little bit about it now. So this stuff happens with USA girls gymnastics. It's happened with USA swimming. It happens in.
So what's the common theme? What kind of environments does it pop up in?
So the common theme is when you get a kid who's away from their home where they're safe with people that aren't their parents, and they're in a position of power over the kids. So think about those factors in like a sports thing, and then multiply that by 100 when you're talking about Hollywood, where like we show in our film An Open Secret, where if you're a 14-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid, and you want to act in Hollywood, you got to move out there, and your parents can't afford to live out there, then you go live with an agent or somebody. Yeah. And you're practically on your own. So you've got incredibly vulnerable kids. By the way, the most beautiful kids, right? And so that's where all the pervs are attracted. Mm-hmm. It's like the big the big Candyland for the pervs. Oh, by the way, the game Candyland. You ever play that as a kid? Oh, well, it was designed by Gary Goddard, who is been revealed to be a serial pedophile, and he is King Candy. By the way,
it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like it's just Candyland,
and he's King
Candy. What is
Candy.
that? Do you mean is that the iPhone thing?
No, it's a board game. It's a big famous board game.
Oh, we didn't have that in England. Yeah. No, I know what that is.
And he is King Candy.
No, the other one
the
is
actual goal is
the iPhone one where you have to break.
I know what you're talking about.
Whatever. Candy Crush.
Yeah,
no, that's something else. Good. No pedos in Candy Crush. Lawyers.
It just seems like everything is infested with these freaks.
It makes me feel very like sheltered. Like I have.
Anthony Edwards.
But then again, I saw around the edges of this. I mean, I worked for DJ Quarterly, the Directors Guild craft magazine, for a little bit. And I dated somebody who lived on the corner of Mulholland and Laurel Canyon, so I was right in the hills. And I saw maybe just like little fringe edges of this, not the kid stuff, but the gay stuff. And
the gay stuff, starts running young sometimes.
It does sometimes, and I never knew for sure whether any of these young men were underage.
The Tiger Heat.
They were certainly super buff, so I was like, they all looked like me, and I just figured they were like my age, but maybe some of them were 5-10 years younger. Who knows?
Did you see the twink thing?
I used to be one. But the point is, this concentration suggests that there might be something. I suppose what I want to ask is there something about the kinds of people who are able to write scripts, act in movies? Is there something about the sort of brokenness of the creative, of like creative geniuses, of great performers, of great writers, of whatever, that makes them more likely to be sexually deviant?
I think it's just the structural factors that I mentioned. I don't really think
so. You don't think there's anything
to them.
So it's not it's not like a necessary.
It's not necessary to be a great artist or director to want to rape kids. No,
but
it's not even more prolific.
Not
it's
quite.
That people with those sick minds get attracted to a place where there's beautiful kids that are there alone all the time.
Because that's not what an evolutionary biologist would say. So there's that guy, was it Nakimoto or whatever, the Japanese guy, says people who are high IQ more likely to experiment more aggressively with, sexual deviance. People who are up there in the genius IQ levels very often heavily push boundaries, and pedophiles tend to be like really smart or really dumb. You got like 130 or 70.
Heavy drugs is a big thing, though, that I think does correlate with it.
Right.
And when people see this new Bryan Singer thing that we release, they'll understand all the details and all the terrible things into that world.
And do the drugs produce a sort of dissociative effect where people start to lose their moral kind of foundations and their compasses, or do people who are already a little disturbed use the drugs to excuse themselves into behavior they kind of want to do but know is wrong? Or is it both?
So it's a little bit of a philosophical, archetype, if you will. So if you work out or you eat healthy, things like that, it gives you like a good feeling, releases endorphins.
Yeah.
And if somebody wanted to put a religious context on it, it would be, godliness or, that a good feeling, and they're attracted to more good feeling. And the same works in the opposite way. People that like doing bad things, they do the drug, there's a negative thing that goes off in your brain in terms of drug addiction. And so people that get hooked on that negative cycle
Talking
now
about dopamine and reward circuits. And
right.
whatever.
And they're getting hooked on the more negative and the more evil thing they can possibly do. And that's so it's like they always need more and more and more and go to more forbidden.
I noticed there was the repetition of the addict in the behavior of some of the people that I saw in Hollywood. So Sandy Gallin, who's dead now, good.
Michael Jackson's protector and manager.
Well, yeah, many other things.
Sandy Gallin is a great bit about Den, by the way.
So he used to always be at parties at my boyfriend's house, and would always ask to borrow laptops, and you'd always find the next morning whatever escort he'd ordered, and they're not massively young particularly, but it was the sort of every single night, another $500, another $1,000 on some poor boy who spends his life in the gym wishing he'd make it in the movies, who has the, undignified task of attempting to fuck Sandy Gallin at 4 a.m. in the morning. I've noticed in that sort of ritualistic...
Isn't that what you call power bottom?
No. I think he wanted them to be the top.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, but I'm guessing, since he went for these muscular men, that he liked being staked out. So he would just be a... I don't know, whatever. But there's something in this sort of obsessive ritualistic repetition of that kind of they're sort of stuck in this. Aristotle would say that getting into good habits is a way to achieve, the good life, right? So conversely, getting into this rut of decadence and decrepitude on a day-to-day basis, gradually you just sort of erode your understanding, your standards of right and wrong, of what a healthy life.
Well, there's a thrill, there's a reward system with getting away with it. So in particular, Sandy Gallin, you're right. In Hollywood, you were barely legal, or you were in your 20s. But when he wanted underage kids, he would have them go out to Vegas. And in fact, in our film,
well, I never saw any of that.
And in fact, in our film, where the reporter John Connolly talks about that big piece that he wrote for Details magazine that got spiked, it talks about a very specific story where the head pedophile of Den, Mark Collins Rector, and Den was a front called Digital Entertainment Network, where all these boys would come and live, and they would pretend to be the Netflix of what was 2000, and it was really a front for pedophiles just to rape young boys. He took a whole trove of boys from Den out to Las Vegas, went and saw a Siegfried and Roy show with Sandy Gallin and with Garth Ansier. And this was actually part of the Details piece which we have that got spiked. So Sandy Gallin did go underage, but he would go for it in a more discreet location. Again, it's that mentality of how much more can I push the envelope, and it's a turn on by knowing you can do something forbidden and get away with it.
What makes me very upset, and it's sort of chilling to me when I reflect on this, and I never told anybody this before, but I was in a diner with Sandy Gallin and my boyfriend, and he was an architect, one of those guys, and a couple of other people. just early hours or whatever. And Madonna comes in and she runs over and she goes, Sandy! And he kind of like barely remembers who she is because he's so syphilis-addled by that point, I guess. But he barely remembers who she is. He sort of remembers that she's on the way out. You know, it's like, it's like, that was Madonna. And he's like, oh, honey. She must know. She must know.
Barbara Streisand, he managed.
These people must know.
He managed every A-lister entertainer of the era.
In the same way that Meryl Streep knew about Harvey. We know she knew about Harvey. These people, so Sandy Gallin, executive producer on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We mentioned it earlier, Eliza Dushku, right? Star of that show, Sarah Michelle Gellar. We were at a house once, and he was watching a movie or so. And it was in the downstairs, like the theater in the house. And he's in the front row, and I'm in the back, like texting or whatever. And she walks across, and he's like, "Who's the fucking dumb blonde like in the way of the TV?" And he's like, "That's Sarah. That's Sarah. She's the star of your biggest show." Whatever. And he's like, "Oh, okay." He really just had like face blindness for women. I think he just didn't notice. We couldn't tell women apart. And she must know. She must know. She's out there. Like my dear sweet Sarah Michelle Gellar. I love her, but she must know. Do you think she knows? She must know. I mean, like he was the executive producer on a show she was on for like 8 years. She must know.
How about everybody on a bunch of Bryan Singer movies where, you know, he would have a trailer and have, barely legal boys shuffling back and forth, or, you know, he would have somebody write for, he had a writer at one time who was like 23 years old and had no other credits. Or how about better still, Pyro from X-Men, the example that we show in our film of that kid Alex B, who was a den kid. Yeah. He was one of the 3 who sued the head pedophile and won the judgment in court. Yeah. And he never had any acting credits before or since on IMDb. You can look it up. Yeah. Alexander Burton. But he's got that little bit part in X-Men. And by the way, it doesn't fit. Because X-Men, you know that everybody who has superpowers is actually like a real character. Like they're in there, they fight. You see them there the whole movie. Yeah. Where he's there just for 30 seconds in the classroom.
Just to be in it.
And that's it. And nobody ever asked any freaking questions like, "Hey, Brian, this doesn't go with the story arc of X-Men. This character isn't in this story arc. What are you doing here? Who is this person?"
X-Men, right?
Doesn't matter. Where'd you meet this kid? Oh, you met him in a hot tub when he was 17. Doesn't matter.
But you've got these people like Patrick Stewart, who's like arguably the lead.
Ian McKellen.
Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, the 2 lead stars of the whole X-Men franchise. Both of them patronizing liberal like nannies and do-gooders, ever ready to pass judgment on Republicans, on whatever. They know. They must know. Don't they know? These. Ian McKellen is a homosexual. Patrick Stewart must have dabbled. He's a thespian, so he's obviously had his fair share of encounters in tights. Don't they know? They must know. Working with Bryan Singer for that long, like heading up the franchise as its lead stars. And where are these like pontificating, grand men of the theater and of Hollywood?
Look, they let the Tiger Heat stuff where you're supposed to be 18. And I mean, hey, is anybody, look, if you're one of the cute twinks and you get in, Tommy Johnson's, car, and he's one of the handlers who goes and finds preferences for these powerful people. Yeah. And they just, shuffle kids back and forth in limos. And there's, 25 or 30 of them. They go from the apartment to the club, and nobody's asking any questions. Do you really know if they're 16 or 18? Nobody cares. So you get this pervasive, like, sliding, and it just continues on and on until you get films like Call Me By Your Name, which just won Best Screenplay.
They're not even trying to hide it anymore.
No, of an Armie Hammer who is 31 in the film, looks every bit of it. Timothy Chalamet, who is, he's 22. They bill him as 17, and he looks all about 15.
Yeah.
And by the way, they show how he's all effed up emotionally at the end, and none of the film critics ever talk about it. They just say it's a wonderful story.
Yes,
and the father, gives a speech where he condones it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not even trying to hide it. What's the most shocking thing that you have uncovered in your investigation of this, ugly universe? What's the thing, because you must be a little numb to some of this stuff by now. What's the thing that's made you go, holy shit? Like, I actually don't want to be in the room right now. Like, I don't want to be looking at this. I don't want to be thinking about this. I feel sick. What's the thing that's arrested you?
Let me put it this way. There's probably a top 10 of them.
Sure.
And they're all, and pretty much all of them are in that interview that we're in the editing process of, where you can see the teaser. And let me put
That's
it this
the
way.
pinned one, right? You can go
Yes,
see
the pinned one. And let me put it this way. If you go to the Deadline Hollywood article that was written about December 6th or 8th by Dawn Chmielewski, you can read some of it, and that's the tip of that iceberg. The reason she wrote about those things and not the top 10
about the other things
is because the top 10 are matters that have to be cleared through law enforcement, we feel, ethically, before we can even air for free. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
The rabbit hole goes deep.
Because at that point it's become sort of exploitative, and you need to make sure that these people are brought to justice before you're
we have to give them a certain amount of time
Yeah, of course.
to do their thing or not do their thing. And, the clock is ticking on that. And when it's up, and it'll be up in a couple months, then whether they've done anything or not, we're releasing it. But, it's no surprise. Tyler Grasham, who is not a name people would know, but he's a big agent in Hollywood. Okay. He got his start 15 years ago when his friend Bryan Singer put him in the business, and nobody knows that except through us. We found it on an obscure blog somewhere, and it's part of that Deadline story. Tyler Grasham, he represents a lot of young talent that's on a lot of shows like Stranger Things and others, or he used to. And he's been accused now.
Because they're all children on Stranger Things.
And he's been accused of about 7 underage sexual assaults at this point, okay?
Keeps getting better for Netflix.
Yeah.
Huh?
Allegedly, he's in Mexico, okay? Gary Goddard is still in London and has been ever since December. And Bryan Singer is spending a lot of time out of the country in the UAE and other places. He's allegedly just come back to Hawaii for a little bit. But there's a reason why those 3 people are moving around Brian's moving around all the time.
Extradition treaties, presumably.
There's reasons those things are happening. There's reasons those people aren't just chilling out at their houses in LA. Let's put it that way. And those reasons have to do with what we have and what we're editing and what we're giving to law enforcement.
It's exciting in the
fucked up.
In the technical sense of exciting.
I'll tell you about it at dinner.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's exciting in the sense of the anticipation one gets as a journalist, wanting to see people brought to justice at last. Now,
when you start losing your appetite, you'll stop me.
I don't really have an appetite anymore. I haven't eaten for some days. I think we're recording this on Tuesday. I think the last proper meal I had was Friday. I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've had nibbles. I've had protein shakes. I'm sure I'm fine. I've had vitamins. What do you call it? Vitamins and protein shakes. No, I'm sure I'm fine. It's a very healthy life. I'm kidding. I eat fine.
Brian likes being pissed on. I don't think that's that, I mean.
I've never understood. I mean, that to me is like a different universe. That is a plane of existence on which other people live. I guess I'm just a very.
But it feeds into
I'm just a very vanilla person.
It feeds into that whole negativity thing, right? About
Surely
I want things that are bad. I want things that are bad.
Wouldn't you want to be the one doing the urination?
Well,
I mean, isn't it? Oh, whatever. Let's move on. Honestly, we're moving on. Okay, a couple of things people are going to want to know.
I found a topic that disturbed you at last.
Of course. Doesn't it disturb anyone? Everyone? I mean, this is there's no shame in being triggered by child rape. I can tell you, I have absolutely no compunction about admitting to you that this stuff fucks me up.
Well, I have a whole gang of that shit, but I'm just trying to peel it off.
Yeah. Just give it to me gently, as Bryan Singer said. Never mind. Okay, a couple of things people want to know. The Democrat Party. Up to its neck in looking the other way in Me Too and Time's Up, right? Now, people have they've heard vaguely about the Lolita Express, Bill Clinton, blah, 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 blah. I don't think anybody knows, anybody reads beyond the sort of scurrilous, scandalous, whatever. To what extent is there some sort of nexus of whether it's guilt per se in terms of actually having participated in things, or given how closely the Democrat Party and Hollywood are entwined with one another, is it the crime of omission, crime of looking the other way, lack of reporting, whatever? If all of these movie stars know, there are senators who know. If all of these producers and directors and agents know, there are congressmen who know. And the chances are, I'm not saying that Republicans are incapable of ugliness.
Dennis Hastert, Speaker of the House.
There must be elected, currently serving Democrat politicians who also know. Have you uncovered in the course of your research anything like that?
We don't really go into D.C., but I'll tell you this. I don't think it's a partisan issue. I think it's on both sides. Okay. With that said, there's one side that at least cares about it outwardly, and that's the conservative side or the libertarian side, who at least they're the people who are saying, oh, call me by your name. This is glorifying pedophilia. This is crazy. And, the liberals all love it as like some coming out story. Yeah. But both parties are guilty. Give you a quick example. Lena Dunham. Okay. She's a big,
We don't speak that name in this house.
Well, no, she wrote multiple emails to like assistant heads of Hillary's 2016 campaign saying Harvey Weinstein has a rape problem. She called it a rape problem. Don't do fundraisers with him. But, they didn't care. They still did big fundraisers.
Yeah.
Have you heard about
the only good thing she's ever done?
But on the Republican side, have you heard about the big Robert Mueller witness George Nader?
Yes. Yes, I meant
that
to
was on our
ask you
Twitter.
about that.
Yeah.
That's where I heard it. This guy, the lead witness in the Mueller investigation, suddenly fleeing the country on child porn charges, and you're like, "Nice one, Robert. Picked a good one there." Okay, so all right, fine. What about this? What about the Bill Clinton stuff? Is there anything in there? Is any of it real? Nobody knows.
Let's put it this way: the Jeffrey Epstein thing.
He does that a lot, doesn't he? Let's put it this way.
Sorry, Jeffrey Epstein got off real easy. If you think about, two things happened. One is similar to like how R. Kelly gets away with it. He paid off a lot of his victims privately, so he was able to escape justice that way. Yeah. Pay him off, and when the heat came down, and not have all the charges happen. Separate from that, for what he did get, he got very little time. He had a lot of stuff. He had things on Prince Andrew, for example. I believe he had Prince Andrew on tape. Prince Andrew had a problem with security clearance at one time getting into this country. Right. He has a lot of stuff on a lot of people. The Bill Clinton stuff, he didn't go to the island. He went on the plane. Now who knows what happens on the plane, because he flew on his plane to other places other than that island.
The Lolita Express.
There are also people who went to that island who went on boats, so they didn't show up in a private plane's manifesto. So the Jeffrey Epstein circle goes wider than what's in his little black book.
Okay.
And Jeffrey Epstein, people had no problem, by the way. This is within 6 months of Jeffrey Epstein getting out of jail for underage sex, okay? He had a party at his townhouse on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And he had people at that party, which was for Prince Andrew, a dinner party, like Katie Couric and the whole New York media establishment. Yeah. And they all showed up and had no problem with it. I mean, hosted by a convicted pedophile who just got out of jail within months.
Yeah. Yeah, and a wonder that every news organization in the world wasn't printing the guest list.
Chelsea Handler was there.
Printing the guest list with shame next to every name. Yes, yeah. All right, let me before we wrap up. This is a lot to take in, and people are going to be looking for an artery at home, wondering how the world could be so messed up. So the movie An Open Secret, people can go find that online. You've released it for free. 4 million people have seen it now. You're preparing this new one. You're dropping more stuff all the time, more journalism, more pieces from An Open Secret. People know where to find you. But I want to just ask you before we go on, what got you interested in this subject?
So Matt Valentinus, he's co-producer of An Open Secret. He's just, done tremendous work the whole way through. I went to NYU undergrad business school. Matt went to NYU undergrad film school. We were in the same fraternity together. We were friends, remained friends. Matt went to work in Hollywood, worked as an entertainment attorney. Sony Pictures, and just keeping in touch. He knew that my hedge fund thing, that I worked very hard, successful, blessed, fortunate. And we were talking about just charitable things. Well, you've only seen the pictures, but
I've seen enough of the vast external vista. When I show up to houses like that, when in the lobby, I like to troll the owners by saying, "What a fucking dump! You have people back here." I did that to one of my friends recently, who was very offended by this. This doesn't go down very well in America, but no, I have seen your sprawling Palm Beach estate.
It does have about 20 feet more of oceanfront than Mar-a-Lago.
Yes, and of course you know that. That's how I know you're proud of it. No, you've obviously done well. So he thought that you might be able to not just provide the resources for doing the film, but also insulate you guys from the consequences afterwards.
He came up with the idea. He felt that there was a big child sex abuse problem in Hollywood that nobody ever did anything about, and nobody ever made a documentary. Well, I'm a fact guy. I've been doing things in hedge fund world like financial fraud, scientific medical fraud, and things of that nature, which maybe gives me a little bit of that emotional detachment that you need with this subject. It's like
when
sort
you
of
work
training.
in finance, you're a sociopath. I get it.
But we did just the research contract. I wanted the facts, and so we just did research. Disarming Films, Amy Berg, previous Oscar nomination, Delivers from Evil. She's the director. We hire them. About $100,000, not real. It's real money, but not film money. We hire private investigators. This takes months. We get 2 thick binders that come back just full of stuff. What's in the film is 5 to 10% of what we had. And when I saw all this, and I saw things like the very short jail sentence that Evan's abuser got for raping him for years, I'm like, this is a terrible injustice. There are many terrible injustices, and of course I'll write the check to make the film happen.
So this is something that you just was sort of thrust upon you in a sense. That
the research, the research
that you really believed in, and you saw. It's interesting you say that. It's sort of the thing that moved you to act was seeing the hypocrisy and injustice of the insufficient punishment.
With that and the number of convicted pedophiles working in Hollywood that we exposed,
and the lack of reporting
all that.
and all the rest of it. Yeah, no, I think it's impressive. I think it's amazing, actually. What was the reception, let's say, from distributors, from other movie studios, to you releasing a movie about their industry that did what you did? How have you been received?
If I take one step back to answer your question, so we release it. We have the film, and we go to the film festivals. Film festivals are really easy to get into. In fact, getting into easily is how they make their money. You pay the fee,
right? You pay to be part of them, and you find some weird little cinema somewhere around the corner in Cannes, and you can play your movie.
They have like a little, they have hundreds of machines where they have like little 30-minute shorts that film students do at every major film festival.
And then you're like Cannes premiered, whatever. Yeah,
right. And then, of course, if you're credentialed like Amy Berg, previous Oscar nomination for best film, you're going to get on a big screen somewhere of prominence on the schedule. Well, L.A., Toronto, and London, all 3 times, we sent them the film. The lower level people who review it for quality were like, "Oh, this is wonderful! Next Amy Berg thing, great film. We're gonna, we'll tell you where it's going to be in the schedule, but it's going to be somewhere big."
Yes.
Few weeks later, we hear the word gets back. Obviously, the higher-ups found out. They looked at it, and we got disinvited from 3 film festivals.
And were you allowed to show up at all? Was the movie disinvited and you were allowed to come, or you just became persona non grata?
The point is to show it, to try to sell it to people. So if you can't show it, forget it.
Yeah.
And each time, Milo, there was never a specific reason given. So there was not like, okay, we have a problem with you saying this or you saying that. Or this or that. Never. So finally, we premiere at Doc NYC on 3 days' notice. It's on the top of Drudge for 2 days.
I remember.
We sell out a 500-person theater.
Yeah.
And all the professional critics see it. New York Times, Variety. Liberal, conservative, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Rave reviews, composite rating of 94 on Rotten Tomatoes. And not a single distributor
will carry it.
Would give us, forget about a normal deal of give you a few $100,000, not even a little money down. We couldn't even get a no money down percentage deal from anybody, including streaming. And guess what? When we got to October and this Harvey Weinstein thing happened 2 years later, I just knew this was going to come. And the day would come when there'd be a Harvey Weinstein moment, and I could just say, fuck you, Hollywood. I don't need your dirty money. I'm going to release this thing for free online.
Just to help the...
Millions of people are going to watch it. And you know what? I guarantee I'm not going to get sued by anybody, and I still haven't. And there's a reason for it. So we were right and they were wrong.
Yeah. I've said some terrible things about people in my reporting career. I've never been sued once because it doesn't matter in what tone you say it, provided you're fighting on the side of justice and truth and everything you say is right.
Well, you've got a much wider license to say stuff than we do in a film.
Well, I mean,
we still didn't get sued.
You say so, but the books is different. Like you can say awful things about people in online blogs, and if you put the same words in here, it's different. No, I've never been sued either because we get our facts right. This has been fascinating and deeply depressing and miserable. I'm going to go and
Oh, if I give you something to look forward to, it's this.
Do that before to take us out.
I'm not going to say where and I'm not going to say when. But I'm busy and we're busy because when I talked about that other 90%
yes.
that didn't get into the film just because of time constraints, and we could have made 15 hours
your
worth
Mitt
of
Romney binders.
Yeah. So there's a couple things. One, there's those huge, the full interviews that we have many hours of. We could release at any time. Okay. Two, there's all that other stuff that we've actually found receptive audiences for a lot of it in terms of the press. And there are some major outlets that are deep into some big stories that you will see over the next few months that will expose some big, major things in Hollywood. Number three, and finally, most importantly, there are victims of child sex abuse in Hollywood. And I'm not asking for this. I have a day job as a hedge fund manager. And we have to give this stuff away. You can't charge for it. But there are some who are brave like Brett, who, for whatever reason, we've earned their trust. They trust in us. They want help telling their story. And they feel like doing a video with us or getting directed to the right press person because they don't trust the press. And they want to get directed to who's working on that particular abuser. They come to us and we help get those out. Some of that's happened in front of the scenes, like Brett, some of it's happened behind the scenes. But more and more of that is happening. And I hope and pray that if anybody is listening out there and they're a victim of child sex abuse in Hollywood, there's so many different ways you can do it. If you want our help, if you need our help, our direct messages are open. It's happened that way before. And you know how to get in touch with us.
Well, there you go. I hate to give you a compliment because you're so full of yourself already, but I do think you're a bit of a hero. I don't mind saying so.
The real heroes are the victims who went on camera, and I mean, they didn't get paid. They had to show their face, and I'm just a guy with a checkbook.
Yeah,
who knows how to research?
There's a lot of things you can do with that money, including just looking after yourself and just enjoying it. And clearly, you do that also. But no, it's. I think what you're doing is magnificent, and it's absolutely great. So, where can people find you online? They can find you at An Open Secret on Twitter, which is very straightforward. Link is out of the movie. Link is out of your new trailer. I've seen all that today. That's all up. Where else would you like to direct people if they want to?
They could go to our Facebook page, An Open Secret.
Fine.
And
look for the logo.
that's about it.
It'll be there. Thank you so much. It's been fascinating and absolutely horrifying. And we'll continue this when your movie comes out, I'm sure. All right. You can watch The Milo Show. Not every show will be as depressing and horrifying as that, but hopefully most shows will leave you with that much to think about. Thank you very much to our guest, Gabe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Milo Show. The Milo Show is a production of Milo Inc. That's hot.